There we go. So Jessica started the recording. I'm Jonathan Newsom, a council member for the 4th Ward. I will call to order this, I believe it's the 3rd meeting for the Finance and Budget Committee of the City of Evanston. It is Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. And I'll turn the floor over to Hitesh very quickly to make some introductions, and then we will go to public comment.
Okay. Now, do we need a roll call here, or? I mean, Jessica, do you want to take at least?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyone I can do that. Let me just do that. Councilmember Wayne, she is obviously absent. Councilmember Newsma.
I'm here.
Okay. Councilmember Burns. No. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Okay. And then we have David Livingston, Member Livingston.
Here.
Okay. Member Macmillan.
Here.
Leslie and Sherry Rikers. I make sure I do it right. Or
Here.
Okay, good. Okay. So, and now I can, with the chair, go over the.
Yeah, Hitesh, if you wouldn't mind introducing our guest tonight,
Right,
and then we'll go to public comment.
Absolutely. So we have today Anthony Maselli from the Speer Financial, and the Speer Financial has been our financial advisor for last couple of years. I think maybe this is the 3rd year. Before that, we had a PFM Financial for a long time, but Anthony has been a great help. They manage like over 100 clients, municipal clients, schools, and others. So they have a vast experience, in this. So, Anthony, do you want to say just a couple of words? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to see everybody this evening. And I'll actually, in my presentation, I have a little bit of a about Speer that I'll go through quickly. Has some of what we do for the city, some of our experience and references, things like that. So, look forward to talking with everybody tonight.
Okay, thank you,
Anthony. Welcome. I don't know if there was an online sign up for public comment. Jessica, if you've seen something, let me know. Otherwise, we will just kind of throw it open here. And it looks like Trisha Connolly and Bill Smith are the only non-committee members on the Zoom right now. So Trisha, do you wish to speak at public comment?
Sure. I would just like to say, I am hoping that based on this agenda, we aren't looking at a big sales pitch on why it's so great we have somebody overseeing our bonds, and we really take a deep dive into how we can dial back and rethink what we do with our budget around bonding. So thank you.
Thanks, Trisha. Bill, I assume you are here as press and not as a member of the public, but I'll give you the opportunity to speak if you would like to do so. Going once, going twice. And is there anybody else online who would like to avail themselves of public comment? All right, well then let's move on. And I think the only thing we're going to be voting on tonight is the minutes of our last meeting. If somebody would like to make a motion.
Motion to accept the minutes, I guess.
Member Livingston makes the motion, and that is seconded by?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Kelly. Jessica, could you take the roll, please?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Could you take the roll, or Jessica or Hitesh?
Let's just see. Am I muted or?
I can hear you, Hitesh.
Okay, so let's see. Let's go with the roll call then. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Wayne, that's Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns, he's absent. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Okay. Member Macmillan.
Aye.
Leslie McNeil, okay. David Livingston
Aye.
and Sherry Rikus.
Aye.
Okay.
By unanimous vote, the motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting has passed. And that brings us to really our only agenda item tonight, which is a discussion item, a presentation from Speer Financial, giving us some background on the city's bonding procedure. And when I talked with Council Member Wynn earlier today, she expressed her desire that we would, as all of the council members on the meeting right now are new on the council. The committee members are obviously new to this newly appointed committee, so that she hopes that we will take advantage of this opportunity to inform ourselves about the bond process. This gives us an opportunity to get into some more detail about the background and the people and the process for our city's bond process. And so as an educational opportunity, this will allow us to be better informed going forward, to make recommendations, to make judgments, and to better advocate for points of view that we might have. And this will be one in a series of several kind of single topic meetings. I think next month we'll be taking a deep dive into the city's pensions. And then in March, we'll be taking a deeper dive into the capital improvement process. So, tonight on the agenda is bonding. And Anthony, I'll turn it over to you. Would you prefer to run through the presentation yourself and then do questions afterwards, or can we interrupt you if we have questions?
Please, excuse me, please interrupt. No problem. Make it conversational.
Okay.
If you have a question on a topic that I'm on, just stop me and we can go through it.
Great. The purpose of this whole exercise is to better inform the committee members here. So we'll feel free to raise hands, and just to manage traffic. If Zoom participants could raise their hand, I will call on you. And Claire, it sounds like you had something to say.
Well, I was just going to say going forward, and it's up to each chair, obviously, but I would like to encourage a more collaborative process for agendas. Obviously, agenda totally gears where we're going and what we're able to do on a committee. And of course, it's Melissa's prerogative, but I would like to see going forward collaboration, deciding on what our agendas will be. And of course, it's up to her, but because that determines what this committee will be doing and how we will be impacting our city and our city council.
What I would suggest is maybe towards the end of this meeting, before we wrap up, those of us on the Zoom this evening can maybe provide some guidance back to the permanent chair as to what we might like to see on the agenda in the next few months. Ms. Rikus.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Since with the Open Meetings Act, only two of us can meet. So are we going to have subcommittees? Like, are we going to maybe have two of us will dive deeper into the pension, two of us will deep into the budget? But, that way we can have more of a working sessions as opposed to just informational.
Isn't it 3? Can't we have 3 members? I thought it was more than 3.
Last time I think they said 2.
It's 3 if we're talking about city council, but a majority of a quorum for a smaller body is it could be a smaller number, and I'm not sure how many members we have.
I think it was like there was some confusion, but I think I'll have to check the email, but I wasn't there, but I think 2 members.
Yeah.
Yes, it's 2.
Oh, sure. I agree, Sherry. I think we should absolutely move forward on that and have a couple of people working on pension, a couple of people working on bonds. I think we need to make more headway with this committee. This committee was obviously formed because of issues with our budgeting in Evanston. So if we can, maybe we can call a special finance and budget committee meeting just to focus on creating those committees, since that's not on the agenda. I would propose that we call one of those maybe next week, just to get moving on that.
Because we all have different expertise. We have a banker, I'm in investments, so maybe it would be helpful.
Right. I do think that will be something like that will be helpful moving forward. for those committee members not on council, you guys are here because you have financial expertise. And by going through this program for the next few months, you'll be brought up to speed along with the council members with the particularities of municipal finance, which I'm not sure what your level of expertise is. And maybe you could lead the maybe you could lead the lecture yourself. I'm not sure, but I do think the more we all know about the process, the better informed we will be to make decisions moving forward. So, I hear what Councilmember Kelly is saying about wanting to buckle down and get to work, and I certainly do think we should be doing that moving forward. But going through this process of informing and educating ourselves will allow us to be more effective at that job when we get to it. So I would like to get moving here, and we can come back to this issue when Anthony when we're done with Anthony's presentation, if that's all right. Anthony, if I could turn it over to you.
That would be great. Jessica, can I share, or are you sharing the presentation? Let me see if I
believe that you can share on your end.
All right, I'm trying to
share screen option.
Perfect. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Okay, great. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. You have to excuse me. My Windows meeting skills aren't as good as there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So when I talked to Hitesh about the agenda for tonight, the thought was just to give really an overview of who we are at Speer Financial, what we do for the city, what the process is for a municipal bond issue, and then do a dive into what a municipal bond issue is, what the anatomy of it is. So when you look at your numbers, or you look at anything that is sent from Speer about prior or future bond issues, you have a better understanding of what is involved in that and what that is. So, and then finally, we'll just do a quick update on municipal rates, and obviously just interrupt if you have questions. Happy to take them as we go. So Speer Financial, as Hitesh had mentioned, we are municipal advisors to the city of Evanston. We are a firm of only municipal advisors. That's the only business that Speer does. We're registered with the Securities Exchange Commission and Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. We've served Illinois municipalities for over 5 decades. And we have offices in Chicago, Illinois, as well as Waterloo, Iowa. We have a satellite office in Waterloo, Iowa. I'm based out of the Chicago office, which is the larger of the 2 offices for our firm. In total, we're a relatively small firm, 9 registered municipal advisors, including myself, and then 7 support staff. And again, we only serve as municipal advisor. So we're not an investment advisor, a broker dealer. We only work with municipalities. We were engaged by the city in 2020, so we've been working with the city since that time. We have a co-advisor, Sycamore Advisors, that you'll see listed on some of the documents, which is a registered women-owned business enterprise, and they work with us during the bond issuance process.
If I could interject there with a quick question,
yes,
Anthony, for you or for Hitesh. How did we choose Speer Financial?
We did the RFP process as we do with these things, and obviously, we have to look at the experience, and most of them, were qualified, the responses which we got. And then it came down to we looked at Speer particularly, they were doing a lot of comparable towns you would see here, And I even checked out some of the references. Marty Lyons was one of them, and the others, right there, Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Naperville, some of the big towns too, And so, and they had a very good, and particularly where even Anthony, a couple of finance directors say, yep, we had a very good experience. They would give you not just what you asked for, but even some of the other alternatives, changes, whether could be a more efficient way to issue the bonds, cost effective. And so finally, based on all those considerations and the fees, obviously, we decided to go with the Speer Financial.
When was that RFP, Hitesh?
So they did our 2 bond issues for us. So it was in 2020. And before that, we had another firm called the PFM Financial, and that's one of the big national firm too. And I think we were with them for a long time, maybe at least 5 to 7 years.
So we've used Speer now for 2 years?
Yes.
Thank you.
And what's the duration of this contract?
I think
Not
it is
that
4
I'm
years.
looking
Right?
to change,
Right,
Anthony.
but
I'm just
I think it is a
getting the lay of the land.
4-year term.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Go ahead, Anthony.
Sure. So we are very active in the Illinois market. We, as a firm, have done over 1,000 issues from 2017 through 21. We average about 200 transactions a year. And as Hitesh had mentioned, we serve a lot of the surrounding communities. We are the largest advisor for municipalities, cities, villages, counties in the state of Illinois, as well as park districts. Those are really our bread and butter. And I listed a few of the communities that we serve in the area here on this page. So in terms of what our services are to the city, it really starts with the planning and implementation of a bond issue. So Hitesh will reach out to me when either there's thinking of a borrowing in the future, or simply needing a debt service schedule to see what a certain borrowing may look like. We help with in between bond issues, analyzing refinancing opportunities to see if there's any availability to save money from refunding an existing bond issue. And then really everything in between. Whenever there's a question regarding a bond issue, it usually goes to Speer, and then Speer figures out if it's a question we answer, or do we need to kind of find that answer, whether it be from the attorney on the issue or somebody else. Once an issue gets started, Speer Financial prepares the offering document. And we're going to go through all of this in a lot more detail as we talk about the anatomy of a bond issue. So we prepare the offering document for the city. It's the city's document, but it's drafted and put together by Speer. Prepare detailed timeline distribution list, make sure everybody's on track and engaged. Keep the issue on schedule. We coordinate the rating agency process. So for every issue, the city is getting bond ratings, coordinate that process, set up the calls, get the information to the rating agency, facilitate in getting that rating. And then we facilitate the bond sale process. So that's whether it be competitive bond sale as the city's used in the past, and I'll explain that in more detail, a negotiated bond sale where we hire an underwriter prior to the sale and use that underwriter to sell the bonds, or a private placement where the bonds are placed directly with a local or regional bank. Once the bonds are sold, 2 to 3 weeks later, we facilitate the closing process, get a closing letter out to the group, make sure funds are transferred into the city's account. Once funds are verified, we close on the bonds. So it's comprehensive process for the bond issue, and then everything in between. When bonds aren't issued, we're always available for the city. So just in terms of your typical bond issue and the timetable here, I know it's a little bit blurry because of the way I had put it in there, but the timetable here is from the city's 2021 issue. So you can get a basic sense of what happens during a bond issue. So step one, it would really be the planning phase. And this may take months, it may take a day, it really depends. But the city and Speer discuss the project, the bond size, the structure, and the term of the issue. That may also include bringing in bond counsel to discuss tax issues, whether the bonds can be taxable or tax exempt, what the differences are, and what those rates look like.
Does that, as it's written here, yeah, one would presume that there is one project per bond. It's
Yeah,
often
and
the case that we're using a bond for multiple projects. So how does that inform step one?
Sure. So, and when I say project, it could be the array of projects related to a capital improvement program. It isn't always, you're right, it isn't always one specific project. You're not just borrowing to resurface one street. You're doing street work, sidewalk work, maybe water work. So it's the project in whole. And really what that means is it's a discussion of how much the funding need is, how much you wanted to borrow, and then talking about the repayment terms.
And those are more of a priority than actually what we're going to be using the money on.
It is, yeah. I mean, what we are going to be using the money on, it's a discussion as far as tax exemption. But in a municipal bond transaction, what you are buying with the funds aren't pledged as collateral. So it's not as if you're borrowing funds for a building and you're a corporation and you're taking a mortgage out where that lender has a security interest in that building. With municipal bonds, you're pledging, in most cases, the city's pledging its general obligation. So it's the bondholder only gets the general obligation of the city to pay the bonds and levy a tax. It doesn't have any security interest in what you're financing.
Got it. David, you have your hand raised?
Yes. So what drives the decision on how big the bond is? Is that come out of a cash flow forecast? Are there just limits? But what really drives the? Maybe this is for Hitesh, really.
Right.
Whose size is it? And,
So that
and
is,
how does that fit into the budget process?
Right. So, and that's a good thing. Yeah. I mean, that comes out of the budget process a year before. So like, suppose when I go to this Anthony late in the summer, right around June, and say, okay, we plan to issue the bond. We want to do that, and let's close it in the first week of September. We have a budgeted, so we had a good discussion, I think, about the CIP projects and which funds, which projects need to be bonded or not. And even we had a brief discussion last night at the council. And so finally, back and forth, we had that experience when we passed the 2022 budget, we means the city council. So yeah, they might say, nope, we don't like this project. Like staff would recommend, say, yeah, we want to issue $15 million bonds, and we would have the listing. And so obviously there will be a discussion with the city council for a couple of times more than that. And they would just say, okay, why you need to bond? Do we need to do? So first they look at each kind of a merits of each project, and then the amount comes in. Okay, do we need it? Okay, we need street work, but do we need $500,000, million, $1 million? And that's where our public works staff, Laura Biggs, our city engineer, they would kind of explain the thing. Oh yeah, we need repairs on this building. Okay, what kind of repairs? Why? How much is that? So based on all that, when the capital improvement budget is adopted as a part of the 2022 budget, that gives me the amount, And then again, before I reach out to Anthony, I would have a couple of meetings with Lara. That, okay, Lara, this is adopted. Is there any material change or not? And then finally, what we call, we present a parameters ordinance, and I think, wait until Anthony says. But I think, David, that's the kind of, number comes out of that previous year's budget process.
Got it.
I think there's also the piece.
I'm sorry, Leslie. Leslie had her hand up.
Hi, Anthony. I have a question. Were you involved in the 501c3 bonds that were issued in conjunction with Crown?
No, it was not.
At that time, we had a PFM Financial, yes, not the Speer Financial.
Maybe you'd be willing, though, to walk us through what a 501c3 bond is and how it was that was the best way to go about financing that project.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can speak specifically to that project, but I can talk a little bit about 501c3 bonds, where the city has the ability to issue bonds on behalf of a 501c3. And I know Hitesh, this had come up with another borrower that wanted to do something like this. These take a lot of different forms. I think in its most basic form, what you're doing is really just giving them they provide the lender, they're the credit. You're not putting your credit on it. You're not putting your revenue streams or your general obligation, but you're putting City of Evanston's name on it. It gets sold tax exempt, but the security is a 501c3. A lot of times they'll have to arrange their own financing. It's really just a pass through.
So are you saying that they're the ones who, I mean,
Right.
they're
So
not the
Leslie,
ones
what are
who-
you talking about? I guess if I understood correctly, what we have done, City, you're talking more like what we call a conduit debt. We have done 2 for Roycemore and Caravelli High School, where their credit is at stake. We just give our City of Evanston name, but the rates and all that is determined based on the financial capacities of that Roycemore or Caravelli.
Well,
So-
no, Hitesh, the Crown was financed with 501c3.
Right. Crown was financed based on the bond counsel from Chapman, and there are a couple of things in the picture. We had, in lieu of the donation, I think, we had given this what we call ice time in return. And that's where the bond counsel advisors to go to 501c route and do that special hearing, TEFRA hearing, which we did.
So you're saying it was secured by ICE time? That was
I
confusing.
think some of them had the thing that, okay, we will, I think Northwestern, I think Erica at that time worked with those organizations who said, okay, we'll give this money. I think Wintrust Bank or some of the others, and they gave the money in return. They were like kind of contractually given some ice time. That's what I
And
mean.
you're
I
saying
didn't
that
go
that's
through
what secured the bond?
No, not secured the bond, but that's where the bond counsel offered to go through 501c route, because you are kind of offering something, not as a security.
May I just for a moment? So this is very important. I mean, we understand perfectly, Hitesh, how like with the Montessori school and others that we issue 501c3 bonds because you have an entity, a tax exempt entity or nonprofit in your town that you want to support. So the city issues these. We understand that. The question is, Robert Crown Center is a public entity. And it appears that, are you saying that we issued the 40 plus million went to Friends of Robert Crown? Because that's the 501.
No. Let's, the money did not go to the FRCC or anyone else.
Why was it a 501c3? Because the city of Evanston is
We had to do the 501c3 mechanism. There was not other entity involved, but because of some of the contracts, when we got some donations, and I think, Anthony, you can just chime in on the technical side, of not because you don't know the exact issue, but just because we have some contracts with some of those people, the institutions who kind of committed to give the donations to the city for this purpose, in return, they were getting ice time. So we were advised by our bond counsel to go through this route and have the TEFRA hearing to comply with the law.
And why that route and not just a regular general obligation bond?
So let me jump in from what I'm understanding from this. So, that can be a regular general obligation bond. What I think Hitesh is saying is that there was some private activity use in there. And when you have, so when you issue a general obligation bond, if it's tax exempt, it's got to be for a public purpose. That's what you're issuing these bonds for. That said, you can issue taxable bonds if it's for a certain private activity or something that can't be tax exempt, some other related.
So Hitesh, just to clarify, we never thought those were donations. We always knew that they were a revenue stream that we were getting for services rendered.
Again, yeah. I was
Just
never
yes or
involved. I
no.
think when I started in 18, and obviously the contracts were in place,
Yep. No, I just wanted to clarify that
Right.
because, as you know, the city and the Friends of Crown have always pretended those were donations, and it's clear tonight that they weren't.
So if I could ask a clarifying question on the bond side, because of the relationship with Friends of Robert Crown, that necessitated the use of a 501c3 bond. We could not use a regular GO bond.
Or we could, it was an option.
And I have to, honestly, I have to look at the actual bond that was issued, but I don't know what secures that bond. If it's Hitesh is the Robert Crown financing was that a traditional bond issued by the city? And then you just did a TEFRA hearing for it.
Just did the TEFRA hearing
So-
because of these donations and in return committing some,
Yeah. So
what do you call this, ice time.
So that's different than what I had led off with. Right? In a typical 501c3, as we had mentioned, it's a conduit financing. In this case, the city did issue bonds, and because of bond counsel determined that because of, it sounds like the way certain funds were coming in, source of funds to repay the bonds, or a use of those funds being private activity in some way, that you had to do this TEFRA hearing. And that's where the 501c3 came in, because you're using bonds for private activity, but that private activity was a non-for-profit, so to speak. So it was a traditional bond. The hearing was necessary in order to keep it tax exempt.
If we could continue with the presentation, if no one else has any questions.
I didn't have any questions, but I did just want to say to David, and especially our resident committee members, that I like that question. And that's really what, in my mind, I would love to hear after we're done with this process from David. And again, some of our resident committee members is, what should be driving these decisions about how much we bond out and when? Because I don't feel comfortable as a new council member with I don't know what our approach is. I don't know how we, make those decisions in a way that's best for the community and that's fiscally responsible. Obviously, Councilmember Kelly has a really strong opinions on this issue, and we talk often, but that is a question I'd love to get answered through this process. Thank you.
Yeah, and Bobby, I'm not sure if you had joined us, but what I had said initially is that we're in learning mode here for the new members of the council, coming up to speed on financial issues, and for the resident members of the committee who are financial experts but may or may not have any particular expertise in municipal financing. Let's take advantage of this presentation and those over the next few months on a couple of other topics, so we are fully informed and do understand and can be better advocates for our residents.
Good. I'll jump back in.
Sure.
So again, we prepare the offering document after we get some idea of the project, the sizing that the city wants, the structure of the bonds, which we work with Hitesh on. The offering document that we prepare includes all of that information. It's then sent out to the working group. During that time, your bond council's preparing what's called a bond ordinance. So with the city, you do 2 readings, first reading and a second reading and adoption. Because you're a home rule unit of government in Illinois, you do not have to go to referendum to issue general obligation bonds. You don't have to do any other authorizing steps other than an approval of a bond ordinance.
So our procedure is straightforward, standard. Other municipalities that are home rule municipalities follow the same paradigm.
Exactly
I
right.
I just have one question regarding steps 1 and 2. Do you, when you're meeting with our staff in steps 1 and 2, do you review all unobligated funds that exist, all unassigned monies that we have before making recommendations?
He doesn't. I'll tell you. Yeah, that's not their purview.
Well, no, I want Anthony. I want to know if our advisor, if you, Anthony, asked to review all unobligated or unassigned funds before you make a recommendation.
So our recommendation is not necessarily on the amount that you're borrowing. A lot of that is done by the city, and it's a policy directive. We're told when we get engaged, this is the amount we're needing to finance. So Hitesh, you could kind of speak to this. It's more of this is what's in the budget for financing. This is on the CIP. This is how much we need. And then where we come in is how to best execute that borrowing.
Okay, thank you.
Sherry, you had a question.
I had 2 quick questions. Can you repeat that one sentence? You said you do not need a referendum, and why don't we?
Correct. In Illinois, home rule municipalities are not required to go to referendum for any general obligation bond issue.
And then does then you fulfill complete projections, so we know how the bond will affect future budgets and things like that?
Yeah, in the beginning of the process, we prepare a preliminary debt service schedule. So we look at, what that amount looks like. We amortized over the life of the loan at estimated interest rates. We keep Hitesh updated as interest rates are changing, for bad or good. Usually, because this process takes a little while, we add some cushion in the front end when we're estimating what rates are, and then hope to beat it as the sale comes.
And Sherry, I just, I support home rule. I want to make that perfectly clear, but I think it is important to know that there are cities in Illinois like Rockford whose, taxes had escalated so much that they ended up with a referendum and voted to do away with home rule to get the spending under control. And then a subsequent mayor came in. But I think it's worth knowing that there are cities that have done away with their home rule because of spending issues with their city governments.
Thank you.
Ms. Marcelli, if you could continue.
Yep, absolutely. So going back to the bond ordinance, the bond ordinance, what it will do is it sets out a set of parameters for issuance of the bonds. So that will be a not to exceed par amount for the issue, a not to exceed interest rate for the issue, and then the final term of the issue are our typical parameters. We'll also put a max levy amount in there. And what that does is since that's the only action that City Council is taking, it sets out the limits for where we can borrow these bonds. So you're giving us the directive to borrow a certain amount of money to fund certain projects, and then setting out limits for how much could be borrowed, how long the loan could be, and the approximate annual debt service that you don't want to exceed on that loan. Those parameters ordinance typically have a window for timing. They don't last forever. They'll typically last at the most 6 months. So if we don't issue within the 6 months, we'd have to come back to City Council and ask again to approve an ordinance to go forward with the sale of the bonds. After that step, after City Council approves the ordinance, we're then okay to sell bonds so long as it happens, the sale occurs within those parameters that are set out by the ordinance. So beyond that, once the ordinance is adopted or somewhere in that process, we're also going to the rating agencies to get a bond rating on the issue, finalizing the official statement, working through comments, receiving the bond rating. We then post the official statement after the bond ratings are received and all comments have been received. We post the official statement to the market, and we set up the competitive sale. We typically do that approximately 2 weeks before the actual sale happens. So on the day of sale, it's a set time and a set date that we take bids on a competitive sale. Bonds are awarded to an underwriter based on the lowest true interest cost, or TIC, which is just an average rate, which takes into account their fee. And I'll go into that a little bit more in depth. So on the day of sale, on the day of competitive sale, the bond sizing and the bond rate is locked in. Once we get the final rates, we resize the bonds to accomplish the goals of the city, which is how much you wanted to bond for in project amount, or if it's a refunding, the exact amount we need to put in the escrow. So we adjust the size of the bonds there, lock in the rates, lock in the size, and then it's typically a 2 to 3 week period until we actually close on the bonds and when funds are transferred. So the transaction participants, and I put the names of the firms that the city has used on this page. You'll have a bond counsel. They'll give you the tax opinion on the bonds, tell you that the projects that you're borrowing can be done tax exempt. They look at the security of the bonds and provide an opinion at the end of the sale. Chapman and Cutler has been used as the city's bond counsel. Again, municipal advisors, Speer Financial and Sycamore Advisors, we had gone through our role. Paying agent and bond registrar, this is the bank that invoices the city and then takes the money for the debt service and gets that to the investors. So they're an important role and crucial, but kind of a small part in a bond transaction, but very important. And then rating agencies, through every transaction, you're going to get the bonds rated and get the city rated. The city most recently has used S&P and Fitch ratings on its bonds.
Now, one of the things I would just chime in, what happened with the addition of Speer Financial, for many years, we always used the two rating agencies. And when I talked to Anthony, and I'm like, how about, what do you think, based on your experience dealing with all these other cities, you know, of our size, of our nature? And then he kind of recommended that, yeah, let's try to go with S&P. City has always used in the past Fitch and Moody's. And I saw lately, particularly for the Illinois town, the Moody's kind of been more kind of a harder looking harder, or maybe more like an extreme, you know, in terms of city finances, and kind of there even assigned a negative outlook before we dropped them. And finally, working with Anthony, we decided to go with the S&P. So what we did is, and I asked him that, okay, how about some of the other cities like Naperville or Schaumburg? They use, and they said, nope, they use only one, and most of them use the S&P. So finally, city decided to go with the S&P, and obviously we saved the, you know, rating agency fee for one of the other funds too.
Thanks, Tish. Leslie has a question, and then I have a quick question myself.
Anthony, can you kind of walk through how everyone on this list is paid? You know, how are you paid? Is it, you know, is it a consulting fee? How is Chapman and Cutler paid? How are, you know, the different underwriters paid?
Yeah, absolutely. So underwriters are, just to start there, and I'll go through how a competitive bond sale works, but underwriters are paid a fee for the underwriting the bonds through what's called an underwriting discount. So they essentially buy the bonds for a certain amount and then sell them for another amount. And that's their fee. That is part of the bid. So we know their fee, and I'll show you how that works in a sources and uses of funds schedule. But it's part of the bid that we consider when we're ranking all of the different underwriters and what their bid is. So we rank it based on the lowest true interest cost, which takes into account the interest rates they're applying to the bonds and their fee. For bond counsel and the municipal advisors, we are paid on a transaction basis. So it's based on when you issue and the amount you issue typically. Paying agents bill a very small amount on each transaction for setup fees. I think it's usually less than $1,000, and then you pay them annually per bond issue to invoice you and then send the money to the investors essentially. Rating agencies are also paid on a transaction basis based on the size of the issue. Rating agencies are paid at closing like everybody else. However, the rating is the one fee that if you were to start a deal and get a rating and then stop a deal and it not go through, the rating is really the one fee in a transaction that you still have to pay. Everybody else, you know, involved, if the deal doesn't happen, then there's no invoice at the end of it.
And all these costs are kind of rolled into the package.
That's correct.
But
We're not paying a separate bill to each of these. It's all part of the bond issue.
And I'll go through sources and uses of funds in a couple slides and show you how that works. But yeah, you're right. It's paid out of bond proceeds.
except if we were to not go through, the rating agency would get a separate, that would be separated out, correct?
Yeah. That is true. It's very uncommon because if we're not going to go to the rating agencies unless we're confident that a transaction is going to happen. Obviously, things do happen, and we've had market movements on a refunding, for instance, where the deal didn't make sense anymore. But the rating's good for 6 months, so you usually find a way to get back into the market to get it to happen, and then pay their fee at that point.
And just to have an idea, when you talk about the bond counsel and the advisors, and that's based on transactional, what percent generally? I mean, because I just don't have a concept.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we're going to go through sources and uses as an example for your last few bond issues. You can see real numbers.
Perfect.
If that works.
And I think looking ahead a few pages, you're going to talk about our ratings separately. So I'll save those questions until then.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. So again, on an official statement, this is the city's offering document. So it's the city's document to investors. We at Speer Financial aid the city in preparing it, but it is the city's document. What this does is it goes to underwriters and investors as they're evaluating whether or not they want to invest in the city's bonds. So it includes information like the authorization, security, and purpose of the bonds, the sources and uses of funds, the redemption provisions, whether the bonds are callable or refundable prior to maturity. Also includes socioeconomic data, financial data regarding the city, and then we attach the city's most recent audited financial statements. So it could become a very large document, and they continue to get larger as disclosure requirements increase. But it does take some time to prepare, and it sets out all of those things so an investor can make an informed decision before investing in the bonds. With the credit ratings, the city again receives a credit rating every time it enters the public market. I've attached here just a quick blurb from the city's last credit rating, which was from S&P. Now, the last bond issue we did, we actually only went to S&P. So we didn't go to Fitch. We did use Fitch because we had to get 2 ratings for the WIFIA loan. But because of the size of the transaction, we just stuck with S&P for the public bond issuance. The city's current S&P rating is AA, stable outlook. So you're essentially 2 notches away from the highest rating, which is AAA. It would go AA, AA plus, and then AAA. When a rating agency is looking through the city's financial profile, what they're looking at is 4 basic things. They're looking at your local economy. So it's your market value, tax base, wealth levels, poverty rate, income, things like that. The residents and businesses that make up the community, because they're the ultimate source of repayment. Then they look at the finances. So that's, how have you budgeted? Has it been annual surpluses, break even? What are your fund balance levels? That plays a very crucial part in a rating. And then it's debt and pensions. And finally, city management. What types of policies and procedures do you have in place? How often are things shared with the board? Does the board see investment and year-to-date numbers on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, things like that?
I have some questions here. The first question is, we have a AA rating. How does that compare to other communities in the area? Are we doing all right? Are we about average? Are we above average? Below average?
No, AA rating is a high rating. Obviously, AAA is the best. AA plus is between you and the top. It's interesting. I would say you're on the good side of average. AA rating for municipalities is actually the most common, and there's a reason for that. Municipal bonds don't default often, and they're generally good credits. So you do get a lot of AA rated issuers, but it is a good rating. Just because a lot of others have it doesn't mean it's not a good rating.
And for the other clients that you work with, how do we rate? Like, as a point of comparison, is Evanston a good community for this? Or?
Yes.
And what could we do to improve our credit rating?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, that could be a kind of a discussion all on its own. What I would say is we could, one thing we could do is look through the actual rating reports. They put a good roadmap. Oop, my light just turned off. There we go. They do include, rating analysts don't give recommendations, but they do give a lot of detail on why they assigned the rating they did. Certain things are out of your control, such as resident income levels and wealth and tax base. And a lot of those things go into, when you see AAA rated communities, the reason that they're AAA, one of the reasons is they just have, astronomical socioeconomic information and data. So those things you can't necessarily help. Finances play an important role. So, building reserves and fund balance, is an important metric, but that has to be weighed by, there may be city projects that need to be done, and building reserves but still doing projects means borrowing more. So that'll weigh, borrowing too much then is a negative on your credit rating. So it's a balancing act. And then with management, it's not a huge portion of the rating, but it is looked at, and having things like formal financial policies and debt management policies, investment management policies, things like that. They go towards assigning you a higher management score.
So if we're benchmarking ourselves against Skokie, Wilmette, Highland Park, Oak Park, City of Chicago.
Yeah. Well, you're much better than City of Chicago. Yes. Well, here, just to give you, for instance, I work with the Village of Skokie. We just received an S&P rating on an issue that's happening right now, and they're AA stable, same rating. So just
is AA plus? It looked like Skokie was. Is that the same thing? AA plus?
No, AA plus is one notch higher, but that's their Fitch rating.
Okay.
That's not their S&P rating.
Gotcha.
And we had same thing, AA plus when we used the Fitch 2 years back, when we used to have 2 rating agencies. And same thing with the Moody's, we were 2 down notch, I think AA2 rating. So then next one would be AA1 and then AAA.
With a negative outlook, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything that we should be mindful of moving forward to either improve our credit rating or make sure it does not degrade?
It's really the things you're doing right now are those things. You're putting in place, good management practices by understanding what you're borrowing for, why or not, what not to do, what you don't need to borrow for, what you can use reserves for, an understanding of why you have reserves, what adequate funding levels are in reserves. Those are the things you need to do. You don't necessarily need to live and die by what that rating says. Obviously, the higher the rating, lower cost of borrowing. But doing the right things for your city from a financial perspective are going to help your rating.
And if we're talking about debt, at what point is there too much debt that it becomes a negative?
So it's interesting. Debt and pensions are 10% or 20% with pensions of the rating. With most municipalities, debt tends to be a negative score, a negative factor. There's not many municipalities that have such a low amount of debt that, especially with the way pensions are in the state of Illinois, that it doesn't factor them negatively. That said, where you would get in trouble with having too much debt is if then the other factors aren't balanced. So if you have an astronomical amount of debt with very little reserves, you could see where that you're starting to have the imbalance there. But it is generally, if you look through the rating scorecard for these, and you look at some other municipalities, debt is typically one of the negative factors, especially when they take into account pensions.
So is it safe to say we have a healthy amount of debt? Are we on the high side, low side? Again, if we're benchmarking against our neighbors?
It's hard for me to say without looking at the statistics versus your neighbors. I think, the city has an internal debt policy. You have a debt limit that you've self-imposed. You don't have one statutorily. The state of Illinois doesn't say how much debt you can have, but the city has imposed one. So that's a good step in saying that you're not going to issue beyond a certain amount. I guess what I would suggest, I think credit rating and the factors that go into credit rating can really be its own discussion altogether. And what I mean by that is, and I've done it with Hitesh when we decided to go with S&P, is we could do a deep dive into all of the factors that they look at, how you compare versus other municipalities in the area, and how you compare versus S&P medians.
And Anthony, you're right, and Councilmember Newsma, one of the factors which I always see in the credit ratings later is the pension liability We have over 200 million in unfunded pension liability. It is on the higher side a little bit because this is an old mature town compared to some of those towns which has been there maybe for the last 50 years or 70 years. So yes, I always see that, or even in our conversation, and Anthony must have heard that too with the other agencies. Obviously, that is one of those things, and we will focus on that. And Anthony can be brought back again next month too, where we talk about this tool called pension obligation bonds.
And Chair, I just wanted to say, I don't want to deny a Q&A period, but Hitesh and Anthony, if you can help flag moments when questions could be addressed at a later discussion, I would certainly appreciate it. I have to cut out at 8, and I want to at least try to get through this presentation if we can. So again, I'm not trying to deny anybody. This is important, and ask your questions, but
okay, then do we want to change it? And if the chair is okay, we let him finish the presentation, and then we can, depending on the time, allow the for answers.
Councilmember Burns, you have to hop at 8 o'clock, so we have another hour, which seems like we should have enough time to get through this.
And again, I don't. If you have a question, ask it. I just want Hitesh and Anthony to just flag certain things right off the bat that we can, cover in a future discussion, because this is obviously a very technical discussion, and we could go into wormholes on any one parts of this. You know what I mean? So let's just, if you have a question, ask it. But if there's a way to just use this as a way to identify good future conversations, I'd like to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, I came prepared kind of for this general discussion, but I think drilling down on the factors that the rating agency use when they assess your credit rating and understanding how you compare, I can, really build that out to make its own kind of meaningful discussion without, now I don't have the information in front of me, but I could get it.
Thanks. Mr. Livingston.
Yeah. So good discussion on credit rating. How much does it matter relative to rate if you're a AA or a AA plus? Is it very significant, and ultimately on what sort of interest rate difference there is between a notch up or a notch down? Yeah, at times like these when interest rates are very low, it's not a huge change. So if you were AA plus, you'd be talking somewhere in the range of, over a 20-year period, a 5 to 10 basis point a better interest rate versus your AA, and probably closer to that 5. If you were talking AA to AAA, so a 2-notch increase, maybe that's closer to 15 to 20 basis points better. So you're talking about, for 1 notch better, you're talking about 0.05 to 0.1%. Thank you.
All right, let's keep cruising.
Okay, sounds good. So the rating agency process, I should just really quickly to touch on that. What happens there is we send information to the rating agency, including the official statement, the city's budget, the city's audited financial statements, any interim information that the city has. We generally prepare a presentation, and then we will meet with the rating analyst or rating analysts. And this is where kind of Hitesh takes over and does a full presentation covering these 4 credit factors, covering the questions that they send us ahead of time. Once they do that, we have that meeting. There may be some interim questions that happen over the next week, and then they meet with a rating committee, and a committee of senior analysts then reviews the information and provides your credit rating. So that's the typical process for assigning a rating for the city's transactions. Oops, sorry. Moving to a bond sale, as I had mentioned, the city has typically used competitive bond sales. And what that means is on the day of sale, so we prepare the official statement, we get the credit rating, we send the information out to the market. And on the day of sale, underwriters will then bid to purchase the bonds and then resell them to investors. I've got here a screenshot from the auction for the 2021 issuance that was purchased by Northland Securities. And again, you're ranking these based on TIC, which is true interest cost. So it's an average of the interest rates that are assigned on the bonds, as well as the underwriting fee that's provided by the underwriter. In this case, we used what's called an open auction process, where the underwriter is able to rebid in the bidding window and better their bid to try to win the bonds. So if they put in a bid and they find out they're fourth place or third place, they know their place. They don't know how much they're out of the lead. So they can then rebid. In the case of your 21 bonds, Northland Securities bid a total of 6 times. They improved their bid from their first bid to their final bid by just over 40 basis points. And the final true interest cost in the bonds was a 1.6148%, beating out Robert Baird by just 1 basis point. So they were a 1.62%, and they bid once to try to buy the bonds. So in total, you had 4 firms that bid a total of 13 times to try to win this issuance.
Now, you can watch this in real time.
That's correct.
All of us can. It's sort of interesting to jump on and watch this process.
Absolutely. We'll send out the instructions for getting a login so that you can watch your sale. You can also go to spearauction.com and check prior or sales that have happened, do replays and things like that to see where other people have sold.
I'll bring the popcorn.
There you go.
So then moving on to the anatomy of a bond issue. And I'm using the 2021 bonds as an example here, and I'll go a little bit more into detail on those bonds specifically. But what I wanted to do is just, as you're getting numbers from us, you're getting par amount, reoffering premium, sources and uses, other things, just briefly walk through those so you know what those things mean and how they interplay with each other. So what this is your sources and uses schedule for an issuance of bonds. In this case, the bond had 2 components. It was a new money component and a refunding component. So you'll see that even though it was one issuance of bonds, we broke that out separately internally into 2 components. Sources of funds included your par amount of the bonds. So that is the amount of bonds that you're offering for sale. In this case, the par amount of the 2021 bonds was $14,420,000. And then you have your reoffering premium. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in the next slide. But essentially, tax-exempt municipal bonds are most often purchased at a premium. So the investor pays you more than the stated value of the bonds. So in this case, for your $14,420,000 in bonds, you were paid a premium of $1,338,000. Because of the refunding component, there was also a transfer in from the city of prior debt service funds on the refunded bonds that went into escrow. So that's that $103,000 number. But in total, so all of the sources of funds from this issuance was just over $15.86 million. So we go into the uses of funds. So this is where that money then goes, where that $15.86 million goes. The first line item there is your underwriter's discounts. And again, this was included in the bid. So it's an amount that we don't know until the bonds are bid, and we award the bonds based on the total lowest true interest cost, which incorporates this number. In this case, they were just under 1%, 0.924%, or $133,240. Then you have your cost of issuance line item. And going back to the question earlier, this is the amount that then would go to those other transaction participants that we saw. So it was the municipal advisors, bond counsel, rating agency, and then the paying agent. And in this case, for the $14 million issue, was $65,000 total. We then have a deposit to the project construction fund. So this is the new money portion of the bonds. This is the amount of money that will be transferred to the city and used for projects. In this case, it was $8,804,000. Deposit to the current refunding fund. This is the amount that's transferred into escrow to redeem the refunded bonds and pay them off. This was $6,858,000, and that includes that $103,000 that came from the city. And then finally, you have a rounding amount. of $976 on this issue. And the rounding amount, you're always going to have a rounding amount on an issue because municipal bonds are sold in blocks of $5,000. So you can't issue right to the penny when you have to issue them in $5,000 blocks. So you have a rounding amount somewhere less than $5,000 on every issue. That amount gets sent to the city, put in a debt service fund or put in the project fund account. From a sizing perspective, what happens is going into the sale, I know the uses of funds. I know, well, I don't know the underwriter's account, but I know the cost of issuance. I know the amount the city needs. I know the amount I need for escrow, and I have those as constants. Then I get bid a set of interest rates, which include a fee and premium and discounts. And I use that information to resize the issuance so that I keep that rounding amount below $5,000. So that's why this, when Hitesh calls me and we talk about a size of an issue, he doesn't tell me the exact par amount of the bonds he wants to issue. He tells me the amount he needs for his project. And then based on the bids, we issue bonds only to provide that amount. And that's important when you take into account this reoffering premium, because you're getting an extra 1.3, almost $1.4 million for the sale of your $14.4 million of bonds.
So for this issue here, how much do we pay back?
I'll go into that as well. So for the repayment of the issue,
yeah.
Let me touch on the pricing summary. The next page is the debt service schedule. So with the premium on the bonds, the way that this is calculated, if you look at this page, remember what you're selling isn't a loan. You're not selling a loan at a fixed interest rate like a mortgage. You're selling a series of bonds that mature in every year, and those bonds are priced at different levels. So if you look at here, you've got bonds ranging through 2041. The coupon rate on those bonds is the amount that you actually pay in interest on the bonds that you're issuing. Okay, so
can you explain why, like in that particular bond issuance, that series, I know Hitesh, we talked about this. I asked why we were setting the ceiling so high when rates were so low. I think it was up to 6%, we said.
Yep.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, because that rate is that we set in the parameters ordinance is related to this coupon rate. And we'll see coupon rates typically up to 5%. And you'll see that in the 29 and 30 maturity, you do have 5% coupon rates. Okay. And that again, so what's happening here is if you look at the 30 maturity as an example, the city is issuing bonds that are due in 2030. The buyer of the bonds wants a coupon rate, wants a nominal interest rate of 5%. So you're going to pay them 5% for these bonds. But because 5% is well over market value, or the market rate, let me say. So if you look at the yield on the bonds, the market rate is 1.1%. So because of that, you're going to offer $945,000 in bonds, and the investor, to get that 5% rate, is going to pay you $1.267 million. So they're going to overpay you to get that higher nominal rate. In turn, what that does is it allows us to issue less in bonds. Because we're getting that premium, if this was a par bond, for instance, if we had a 1.1% coupon at a 1.1% yield, then that maturity value would have to be 1.267 million, not 945,000. So we'd have to increase the size of the bonds because we're not getting the premium. So to the city, what you want to do is you want to focus on this yield column, because that's the yield to the investor and the yield to you. And I see a hand raised as well.
Yeah, David.
Yeah, and sir, I don't know what happened to my camera. I crashed out briefly, and when I came back, it said my camera wasn't working. So I apologize. But is that just so that 5% coupon rate? Is that just a function of the municipal market? Because to me, it just adds confusion, right? Yes. We are paying 1.1%. We are borrowing $1.3 million, right? It is, and so it just what's the dynamic there of why is it just the market is only going to buy bonds that have coupons at stated percentages? Because the later terms are all much closer to the yield, right? The later bonds are all much closer to the market yield.
Yes. Yeah. It really is just a function of the market and what investors want. And you have to remember that these are tax exempt bonds. And then that means that the interest that this investor is getting is federally tax exempt. So for them, if they're buying a bond, they'd rather pay additional money to get a bond with a higher rate that then pays them interest at a tax exempt level. So there's a little bit of tax kind of gamesmanship in that regard for it. But it's 100% not dictated by the city or by us. It's by the bidder. Every underwriter that bids with a totally different interest rate scale based on what investors that they have to purchase these bonds. So in this case, what you see is a mix. You see a couple 5% coupons offered at very high premiums. Then you go to the end of the schedule in 2041 and you actually have discount bonds. So what that means is you're offering $520,000 in bonds. The market rate is a 225. The investor only wants 2.125, 2.125, and therefore they're going to pay you less than the stated value. It's for $520,000 in bonds that you're offering. They're paying you $509,000.
Right. Okay. And are we always are we stuck with this term structure as well? I mean, to me, 20-year bonds are expensive, right? And that's another question I have for later is, do municipalities ever have like a floating rate sort of instrument, a commercial paper type instrument that is much lower in rate? You don't want your whole structure to be that, but who dictates that you're issuing 20 years of bonds here? Because you're having to pay up, it's not, rates are a little bit distorted now, but if you're always issuing 20-year bonds, you're always locking into a high term structure sort of interest arrangement. And,
Sure.
Who makes that decision?
The city. There's no.
So just I would add that, and I know we are kind of running short of time just to wrap up. But we issued, I work with the financial advisor, and that's where I look at the annual debt service. That, okay, how much increase would this generate into a additional tax levy? Because this is now, turns into a debt service tax levy. So I look at the annual debt service. Now, when we did for the Crown, we did 25-year bond and with no principal payment for the first few years. That's how we structured so that we don't have to increase the tax levy.
Leslie has her hand up.
Yeah, dovetailing off of what David said, using maybe some shorter term instruments will kind of match fund as well. Because, one of the things that surprised me in the past was, we were looking at doing 20-year bonds and we were financing things like, filling in potholes or resurfacing tennis courts, or in some cases, as we used to do, paying engineer salaries. Those are not things that should be financed over 20 years. I mean, there's a mismatch in funding.
Yes, and again, as Councilmember Burns said, this is a different things. In the past, city has used variable bonds. The city has used a line of credit for a temporary requirement for some of the tips. So this is like a whole discussion where we can talk for a couple of hours on how we fund the projects. Once the council says, yes, we like the project, go ahead, but we want to talk about how we're going to fund this.
And did we not lose money actually on that 10-year we refied, how much was it? 8 million in that last bond series? I think we actually did worse than we would have done had we let it mature.
No, there was
40,000, not a lot, but I think we ended up actually.
So I could pull up those numbers separately. No, the city saved significant
4,000. I think that was the savings
by doing that.
And even I would just tell you again, yes, I know the timing wise, Anthony and I talked about some advance refunding right at the height of the COVID, and I think I would say November of 20, and the savings offered by some of the banks, which was an advance refunding, was around 300 to 350,000. Anthony, correct?
Yep.
And then I'm like, Anthony, no, I don't think this is enough. Obviously, I wasn't going to get the bigger savings because already the coupon was low for the bonds we were going to refund. But then I said, why don't we just wait until we do the current refunding in 21, even though the economy, the interest rate environment, the COVID situation was so uncertain. And ultimately, when we did the current refunding, we, I think, generated 654.
666. Yeah,
666.
654. I'm looking at it. I just pulled up that page. I forgot that we did have it in the presentation. Yeah, there was nominal savings, 666,000 in debt service savings from doing the refinancing. So that was in 21 refinancing the 2012 A bonds.
But we
So
had a
that-
big huge savings in 2020, correct? When we
yeah, that
refinanced
was even
over
larger.
1.2 million or over 2.2 million, I guess.
2.5 million in savings on the 20 bonds when we refunded the 10As and 11A bonds.
The 2010.
In the interest of time, maybe we can get back to the presentation and get through this as quickly as we can while Councilmember Burns is still around, and hold questions about what to do with the knowledge we are gaining and the role of this committee until after the presentation.
So jumping back in, going from the pricing summary, this is the rates that are set on the bonds. We then structure the bonds with a debt service schedule. So the repayment schedule then on the bonds. So for the 21 bonds, we have maturities ranging from 2022 through 2041. The city pays principal on an annual basis, and it pays interest on a semi-annual basis. Again, we can structure these bonds really in any way we need to, based on the policy directives of the city. So in this case, what you're looking at is, remember this issue had two purposes. So you've got a new money purpose that was 20 years, relatively level debt service, and that's running the whole length of the term. And then you've got that refunding. And with that refunding, that is only through 2032. We didn't extend the term of that refunding. It's not like a mortgage where if you had, 8 years left on your mortgage and you refied with a 30-year, you now have a 30-year mortgage. We kept the term. We didn't extend the repayment term on those 2012 A's. So that's why you see this big bubble in debt service where it jumps to 1.5 million, over $1 million through 2032, and then dives off. That's because you're essentially looking at two purposes here combined into one. Oh, and again, really quick, these coupon rates then, as I had mentioned, these are the nominal rates that are being charged on the amount of bonds you're issuing. So in this case, you issued $14.4 million in bonds. To accomplish was essentially $15.6 million in uses. So if these were all issued at par, if the bidder came in and said, I'm offering you par bonds, we would have needed to issue 15.6 million rather than 14.4. So taking a look just quickly at the 2020 and 2021 bonds. In 2020, we issued $27.96 million. So about 16.5 was for new money. And then the remaining was the refunding of the 2010A and 2011A bonds. The bonds were sold August 10th, 2020 and closed in September. Those bonds are callable. They have an optional redemption date, so they could be called in early, December 1st, 2028. Final maturity on the bonds is 2040, and they were purchased through a competitive sale by KeyBank Capital Markets at a 1.537%.
What type of event would trigger a call?
Generally, they're called in if, so it's an optional redemption, and that's your option. You call them in if rates are lower and you want to refinance them, if you want to restructure them, or if you want to pay them off.
Like when we refied, it was callable.
Exactly.
Just now.
Okay.
Exactly. So municipal bonds, unlike a mortgage, are not callable anytime. You set the call date. Typically, it's 8 to 10 years after issuance is when you can first call them in. So here was the sources and uses page for the 2020 bonds. So again, this was 27.96 million in bonds. You received a reoffering premium of 3.35 million. Because there was a refunding component, you had that transfer in for debt service that went right into the escrow. I think my office wants me to leave. They keep turning the lights off. You've got the underwriter discount was $9 a bond on this issuance. Again, that was part of the bid. Cost of issuance based on the $27 million or almost $28 million par was $134,000. One thing you'll notice is that this issue had 2 credit ratings. So there was an additional approximately $25,000 in rating fees that we eliminated in the next issue when we only went with one credit rating. Project construction fund deposit was $16.488 million, and then deposit to the current refunding fund of $14.7 million. It went into escrow to refund those 2010 and 2011 bonds. Here was the maturity schedule, which ranged, yields from 0.3% to 1.9%, and then the debt service schedule. Again, debt service schedule can be a little funny because this is two purposes. So it's accomplishing two goals. You've got your new money structured relatively level over 20 years, and you've got this refunding that's structured to term for each issue. And then here's just a summary of that debt service on an annual basis without showing the semi-annual interest payments. For the refunding portion, again, for the 2020 bonds, they refunded the 10As and 11As. Here is, if you're looking at a debt service comparison, what this does is it takes the total principal and interest from the old bonds as a summary. So they ran from 21 through 31. And then you add in your new debt service, which runs, again, to the same term. We didn't extend the term of those bonds. I'm sorry, total P&I, new bonds, existing bonds. This old net debt service is your old debt service from your 10As and 11As. And again, we did not extend the term. So you'll see that the new debt service, which is the total P&I plus what was left unrefunded, is less than the old debt service. Oop, I made it move. And that results in your savings. So this is your debt service savings. This is what you'll actually save from the refunding. And it was just over $2.5 million. And then what you see down here is it's present valued back to today's dollars using the all-in rate, which was just over 1%. So on a present value basis, it was almost $2.5 million in savings, or 17% of refunded principal. The rule of thumb from GFOA is 3 to 5% is your target. So we were well in excess of that with these refundings. And then moving to the 21.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Anthony, okay. For the net present value calculation,
yes.
How is that the discount rate?
It's discounted based on the all-in cost of the bonds. And so you'll see here, net present value cash flow savings at 1.058%. Mm-hmm. Remember that the true interest cost of this bond issue was like about a 1.5%. The reason that this is lower is because it's just for this portion of the bonds, which only extended to 2031. So it discounts it based on the cost of the bonds.
So there's no judgment involved in determining that number.
No,
I
don't.
That comes from the process.
You got it. Yeah, I don't plug in that number. It's automatically populated. I mean, actually, I could actually change what rate it's using. I can use the bond yield. I can use the tick. I typically use the all-in cost because it's a higher rate, and I think it gives you a more true representation. So it actually shows a lower net present value savings than if I used a different rate.
Thanks.
So the 2021 bonds, again, we went through this with the example, but it's 14.42 million, 8.8 of that was new money, and the remaining was the refunding of the 12A bonds. We sold these August 23rd, 21. We closed them on September 14th. These have an optional call date of December 1st, 2030, and a final maturity of December 1st, 2041. Purchaser was Northland Securities and a final true interest cost of 1.611%.
So for the refi, we extended that another 10 years. That would have matured when, in 2032?
For both refinancings, we didn't extend the term length of the bonds. For that portion of the bonds, so I'll go back to this as an example. The old bonds here, if you look at old net debt service, the final payment was December 1st, 2031. And the final payment on the new bonds related to the refunding is also December 1st, 2031. We did not extend the debt service on the refunding portion.
Anthony, quick question on the next slide. Right there. Dated date September 14th. That should be 2021. If I'm
yes, that's the typo. Yes, it should be 2021. Correct.
No worries.
You owe quite a bit accrued interest if it was 2020. So looking at this we spent a lot of time on this, but again, it was 14.4 million. This was to accomplish these two things. It was to provide 8.8 million in new money and provide for the refunding of the 2012 A bonds. We saw these 2 pages. This is the net debt service schedule for the new money portion only. So if we look at this now, you look at the total debt service schedule, and again, we talked about how we've got on the right side here, this schedule where it goes up over $1 million and then drops below that to 500,000. The reason for that is if you pair out these two purposes, you look at the new money only. New money was $530,000 a year for 20 years. That was to borrow for that 8.8 million. That is the amount you borrowed, and the repayment schedule. Now, if you look at the refunding portion, this amount was, you issued little over $6 million in bonds, repayment schedule 22 through 32, because the old bonds matured again 22 through 32. So we did not extend the bonds, and then your repayment schedule on just the refunding is about $950,000 for a few years and then $580,000 for the remainder, and that mirrors what the old bonds were. So making sure we're taking savings in every year.
So how much did our annual payments towards the refi, the 2012, since it's going to mature or whatever you call it, the same date. So how much did we reduce what we owe for those remaining 10 years?
It'll be, so that'll be the savings column here. $666,466 was the total debt service savings
Over the remaining 10 years.
over the remaining term.
The net present value of which is 654,261.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Great. Leslie.
Anthony, are you the consultant on the pension bonds that the city of Skokie is considering? And can you tell us a little bit about that instrument?
Yeah, I'll go briefly and available for further discussions because they certainly warrant it. It's a complicated process, but yes, I am. And so with the idea of a pension bond, you have an unfunded pension liability for your police and fire pension plans that charges you an interest rate. And Hitesh, you can remind me, it's somewhere around 6.5% to 7%, I would imagine. Okay, so you have this liability.
6.5.
$200 million at 6.5%. The concept behind a pension obligation bond is that you could fund that liability through the issuance of bonds and repay that with a lower bond rate. So say your bond rate, because you'd have to issue these as taxable general obligation bonds. So your bond rate's around 3%. So I pay off my 6.5% liability with a 3% liability. That's the 1 million foot overview on how these work. What it is it's a arbitrage play at its core. You have this unfunded mandate. You have this unfunded liability that you have to pay each year. It's charging you an interest rate. You could pay it off through the life and continue to earn that, or you could borrow money. Now, for the borrowing of the money to work, if it's 3%, if I'm borrowing at 3% and I'm taking all of those proceeds and investing in pension fund assets, you've got to know that you're going to make over 3% over the life of that. That borrowing, or else this didn't work. So you're borrowing on one index really to invest in another. These POBs have been talked about for a long time, especially in Illinois. What I would say is that when we used to talk about them and people would introduce the idea and the taxable rate was 5.5%, and we were talking about going from 7.5% or 7% to 5.5%, the risk was too high. There wasn't enough savings versus the risk of knowing that you had to be 5.5%. Now, because taxable interest rates have dropped, people are grasping onto the idea, and a certain number of them have done it, including Skokie, which we're intending to price next week.
Have they lost some? I mean, have they lost some of their stench over time? Because for a long time, it was sort of big red flag.
There was a lot of reasons for that too. One was the risk issue I just went into. Another was they had been done so improperly by so many people over the years. And I won't get into specific examples, but you can look up in the past where people had packaged the bonds along with an investment. And I think there was a number of school districts that lost a lot of money doing this, where the banker wrapped it up in some CDO and they lost all their value of their investment, but still had the bonds to pay off. There were also examples of people borrowing to pay normal costs, which is an operating borrowing, which isn't good, or using the bonds to, drastically extend the term of the liability. So, hey, I've got to pay off this liability by 2040. Let's issue the bonds for 40 years because now I just pay less and we'll kick the can down the road even farther. So there's a lot of ways to do this really poorly. So it's important to manage that as you're thinking about them.
Thanks.
And I think we can touch more on this next month when we have the pensions thing. So we can, I will ask actuary and I will see if we want Anthony back, or even at least let's first hear from the actuary. That's the most important. And then we can have, if the council is interested, we can have Anthony interested in that. I've already talked to Anthony a few times in the last 6 months. I mentioned this thing at the very last meeting at the council, pension obligation bonds, before you guys adopted the budget. But we can certainly look at it. The things have changed a lot. But for many years, our association, GFOA, Finance Office, was against issuing the POBs, pension obligation bonds.
The last thing I was just going to cover is just a brief market update. Not to go too in depth here. We've seen a lot of change even in the last couple of weeks as people are kind of digesting Fed minutes, and we've seen Treasury rates tick up. But historically, what this is an index of 20-year AA bond yields. So it's a really good representation of where a borrowing would be if you were to do a 20-year bond issue right now. It's a big chart. It goes all the way back to the 80s when you would have to borrow at 13%. But looking at the last year, we saw beyond COVID and after some spikes, and then ending kind of the summer of last year and beyond, really historically low interest rates. We're starting to see some trends upwards now. Nothing that's, pulling us too far back up to the levels we were, 18, 19. So you're looking at right now, still close to 2 to 2.5% on a level that 20-year issue. This is kind of a snapshot of a few things. The top left is the AAA MMD. So that's the AAA Municipal Market Data Curve. So that's the index that municipal bonds are priced off of. And I've got just from 21 through 22, you can see the 2-year, the 10-year, and the 20-year AAA Municipal Market Data Curve. So not a lot of movement. We're starting to see some trends upwards now, but still extremely historically low interest rates. One interesting thing, if you look at the chart to the top right, the issuance between taxable and tax exempt bonds has changed in recent years for a few reasons. With the last tax reform, they eliminated the ability for cities to do tax exempt advance refundings. So what that means is you used to be able to, if you had a bond issue that wasn't callable for a few years, you could do a tax exempt refunding, put the money in escrow, invest it at no more than the bond rate, and then and refund that old issue. So the money would stay in escrow, and if it had to sit there for 3 years, it could do that and then pay off your old bonds. Federal government said they don't want that to happen anymore because for them, it's two investors buying municipal bonds and it's costing them additional funds. So they outlawed it. So now you can only do current refundings, which means we can only refund an issue within 90 days of its call date to do a tax exempt, or I should say no earlier than 90 days to do it tax exempt. You can do it anytime after. So what that did was it forced people to start doing taxable advance refundings. And with taxable rates being so low, they started to work. So you're starting to see more taxable issues in the market the last several years. And then finally, one thing I just to point out, obviously, rates, Treasury rates specifically last couple of weeks have jumped quite a bit. But looking at the interest rate forecast, this comes from Bloomberg, just a spot check of where economists believe the market rates are going. It's forever always depicted higher rates, and where that actually is going to go, nobody knows. But this does seem to believe that if we look at the 10-year Treasury by the end of the year, we should be looking at a 2% Treasury is the consensus. Whether that it comes into play or not as we get additional COVID variants and what have you, we'll see. But the consensus is, in the next couple of years, we'll start to see a kind of a gradual increase in interest rates.
Significantly higher than where we're at now, but still fairly low by historical standards.
That's exactly right. So that was all I had. Happy to answer any additional questions or flip to any other pages.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Really helpful.
Welcome.
Does anybody have any questions about the bond process here that Anthony could help us answer?
I think it would be helpful if we were able to benchmark ourselves against other communities. What's their mix? What are they issuing bonds at in terms of term? What's their, because you can tell on these rates here, there's an enormous incentive, again, with being still conservative about it, to maintain a shorter dated profile on your bonds, or to have at least some of your debt be very variable in nature, so you're paying off that lower curve, not that upper curve. Noting that, of course, that there's a risk as rates go up, but what's a good benchmark of the judgment that other people have made about the right mix between issuing long-term bonds and some sort of variable rate instrument for at least some of your bond structure? That would just, I don't expect you to have the answer now, but that would be interesting to understand who we should benchmark against.
I could kind of talk to that. I cover a lot of municipalities, a lot of home rule municipalities that are well rated. I would say really 20 years is probably the benchmark as far as your typical new money issuance based on the projects that they're undertaking. Obviously, yes, if you're doing a road restructuring, or not restructuring, but a resurfacing that's not going to last 18 years, then we don't want to issue 20-year bonds for that. If you're buying a fire truck at $1.6 million, you don't want to issue a 20-year loan for that. So you do want to match your repayment with your asset. That said, there's not a ton in the municipal market especially in the local municipal market of variable rate instruments. There's only a few really remaining out there. City of Peoria is actually one. They're a client of mine, and we're actually taking it out this year. It's only around 0.5%, but we're looking at rates potentially going up. There's not really much left on it. And with long-term rates as low as they are, they're gonna call it in and not have to worry about that. You have to assign a credit facility every 3 years. It becomes kind of an internal headache for them. I certainly understand the concepts, but from a practical standpoint, in the municipal market, it's not used as frequently.
Okay.
Jerry Steve, I see your hand raised.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm using my husband's computer. Sorry.
Good.
I might be dating myself, but years ago when I was in banking, we would buy non-rated bonds. And is there a cost benefit? Because I know we have to pay for the rating. Do we analyze being rated versus non-rated?
Yeah, there is a cost benefit, and it weighs heavily in favor of getting a rating. Where we look to see if a rating makes sense is when you get to the BBB and lower level. Occasionally a BBB issue won't make any sense to get rated. Certainly lower than that, when you're talking about non-investment grade, it doesn't make sense to pay for a rating.
But we have good ratings, so we should always do that then.
Exactly. However, that said, so I do a number of 1-2 year issues for Illinois park districts. And that's a case where even if you have a good rating, if this is a 2-year instrument, and maybe we're privately placing it with a local bank, or even if we're publicly selling it, that's where we do have to do that analysis to say, okay, what is this really going to if you're doing a $5 million issue, but it's only 3 years, and that rating is going to cost you $18,000, are you going to save $18,000 in interest costs over those 3 years? If a 20-year deal, it's going to easily make up for the cost. 3-year deal, it may not. So we do have to do that, and often sell those things without ratings.
Thank you.
So Hitesh, how often are we going through this process on an annual basis?
How often means we issue the bonds. I mean, city has issued the bonds almost every year, except I could remember 1 year, 2009, way back when we did not issue the bond,
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I think Councilmember Reed brought it up, why we need to issue the bonds, because this is an old town. A lot of money required for the capital projects, infrastructure, water, sewer. And and at the same time, when we issued the bonds in the past, there are some bonds which become callable, and generally they are after 10 years. So, and we always generate a substantial savings. You see, last year, we had $2.5 million out of refunding savings. At the same time, you have to remember that not all the bonds are we levy for that. The bonds which are issued for parking funds, bonds which are issued for TIF funds, bonds which are issued for water fund, they are paid for by the fund revenues, parking revenues, water fund revenues, or if we have issued bonds for some of the TIFs too, and they are paid out of the TIF incremental revenue. So
and those would be separately issued.
No, we did. I mean,
or would they be all packaged into one issue, so we're saving on the transaction cost.
Right. And so, but when we did it, it was before the Speer Financial with the PFM. We did it as a 2018 A, B, C, D. So one of them was current bond, second was refunding, third was a taxable bonds for the TIP. So we did as a separate series of bonds. But my point is sometimes people see the higher amount, say 20 million bonds, city is issuing or 25. Half of them is refunding. The other half of that is for the water fund or parking funds or the TIF funds, and which does not have any impact on the tax levy. So ideally, you have to look at for that CIP money, the capital projects, which is tax supported debt.
And so we're not going through a bond for, $2 million for a sidewalk project in February, and then June, $5 million for a street project, and then September, $15 million for a sewer project. We're putting all that money together
once a year
and doing it once a year. And so the bond process really goes hand in hand with our capital improvement plan.
Absolutely. And that's why even I mentioned yesterday that why we do it later in the year. The only time I did it early in the year because we needed the money for the crown. I think it was a 2018 bond, which was issued in May. But otherwise, by doing it in August and closing in September, we can refund the previous bonds as a current refunding. And as Anthony already mentioned, that now we cannot do the advance refunding as a tax exempt, which used to be the case. So obviously we would lose some savings by doing a taxable refunding. So that's why, and I work with Lara too. I mean, they are the people who have the timeline, who are working with other agencies in terms of grant and funding and working with the contractors. And I asked them that, okay, this is my timeline when I start conversation with Anthony. And I shared that with Lara, Dave Stonebeck and all that and say, are you okay if we get the money in September? And they would say, yes, we are fine.
Right. So how much we are going to borrow or how much we're going to bond is really a function of the capital improvement plan and the budget.
Absolutely.
But
how we go about bonding and the most efficient way to borrow that money, that's what we would talk to Anthony about.
Right.
But I think we also, to Anthony's point, the importance of matching repayment with our asset. I think that's something that we can do a better job at our city when we talk about routine maintenance jobs, like we really don't want to capitalize 20 years on repaving and just things like that. I think we all agree that, my sense is that.
And Councilmember Kelly, you are absolutely right. You brought up this thing last night. Here's the thing, and this is the dilemma for anyone. If I come to you and say, yes, you say, okay, just take away these 3 projects, which is like more like under 5-year life, and we don't want to make sense. Yes, from strictly finance. How would we bring the funds? are we going to have the fund balance be used? And for at least a couple of years, we can use, yes, ARPA money because it's eligible for the certain capital projects. So we can use that. But my point is,
It's very expensive though to cap it for 20 years to be, paying interest for something that's routine. It also is not giving us a realistic idea of our budget in terms of how we levy also. So I think it's really important that first we look at, including this into our budget, and then anything that's extra or that's not a necessity, we look at that in terms of capital projects and bonding that. But routine maintenance, we need to figure out what we need in our budget. And sometimes we might just say, guess what, we really can't afford to do certain things. Because I think it's really not a good way to spend our tax dollar by, like I say, capitalizing over 20 years, salaries or street repaving, things that we do every year. So, and I think, that was Anthony's point about matching the repayment with the asset. So I just would like to see us move more in that direction.
It seems like it might be, a foreseeable course of action that this committee, once we go through the, review process of over the next few months and learn about the pension obligations, learn about the capital improvement process, that this committee, using the expertise we now have available to us, does make some recommendations or guidelines to the council, which or to attach to the council what form those recommendations might take, whether that's a resolution or just a policy recommendation. Like, in my opinion, that is what we're here to do. And it's going to take us a few months to get there, but we're heading in that direction.
Absolutely, I agree. And we can touch base more. I mean, it would be relevant when we discuss in March about the capital projects and funding. Again, yeah, we can kind of relook at these things, and try to kind of flush out the list of projects and,
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from our financial experts on the committee, David and Leslie and Sherry. Does that sound reasonable to you? Is that the kind of thing you guys had in mind here?
Yes, I think to learn as much as we can and then look for some structural sort of things that might make sense to relook at an issue that has just been done a certain way for a period of time and just needs a fresh look. I think that.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Sherry also talked about, is maybe sooner than later getting into these subcommittees, because a couple more months of this is a long time. It took a long time to get the committee even, the first meeting on the calendar. I guess I feel, I love the educational part of this, but let's get going.
Hitesh.
And I agree with what they both said. This is Sherry.
Given the timeline of the budget process and the capital improvement process, when would it be? Obviously, sooner is always sooner rather than later is always best. But by when would you need if there is additional guidance or a change of direction or some recommendations from this committee? By when would you need that in order to incorporate those changes into the next cycle?
I mean, generally, I would come to you. I think it is the bond ordinance, generally maybe the last meeting in June or the first meeting in July, and that's enough. And then we go about selling the bonds in August and finally closing in September.
Right.
So,
but
yes.
But that's for money that was approved, last year for the 2022 budget.
But at least you can decide in terms of the size of the bond, which Councilmember Kell is saying. Okay, you might tell me go ahead and use some fund balance. Go use some excess money from general fund. Go and use $1 million and just issue $5 million in bond, not $10 million. So these kind of things. So,
all right. So by June, July is when.
By June, because I would come to you in July. So yeah, by June 30th, makes sense. So that I can tell Anthony that and council makes a decision and tell Anthony final amount that we want to issue the bonds, but it would be of this amount.
Mm-hmm. And so if we were going to form subcommittees or working groups, I think we've concluded that they can be no more than 2 people or 2 committee members.
And I'd recommend that they be each one with one of our experts here. So
You're saying one council member and one community member.
I think so, yeah. Or it could be two, but maybe they don't meet. It could be three on a group, but you wouldn't meet all three. But I would say if each of our finance experts here wouldn't mind taking one area, then each of us can work, with one of them.
Steve and then Devon have their hands raised.
Oh, it's Sherry, but I
I'm
keep
sorry,
saying Steve.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. Yeah, when I was
Sherry.
on the pension board for Illinois, we had committee meetings like this, but then we actually had open working meetings. I don't know if that's it's great to get all this education, but there's so many questions and things we'd love to really dig in deeper. Is it possible to have another meeting with the full group and just have an open meeting where we can discuss some of these things?
Sure.
Yeah, I think, we do have our regularly scheduled meetings. It's not beyond the realm.
But we're
of
like moving on to the next topic already.
Yeah.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface with one topic and then moving on to the next without really getting more involved with it. So.
We could schedule a special meeting, to continue the bond discussion. We can have another meeting. We can always add a meeting.
Devon.
Yeah, I just want to note that I'm not, I haven't raised it during the discussion, but I'm not super comfortable with groups of two meeting. I think I get we're trying to avoid OMA, but it just at some point seems a little bit of a stretch. So I agree with Steve, joking, that we should. I certainly think groups having things brought before the entire committee and having a full discussion makes sense. If there are particular issues that we feel that we need to separate folks off into, and we don't want to go through the subcommittee structure, that's fine. But I don't think we should set ourselves up that we should really be planning for having these groups of two, meeting to avoid OMA.
If I hear you, what you're saying is if the need arises, we can go ahead and do that, but no need to set it up in advance.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, I don't understand how it could hurt to have people rolling up their sleeves and volunteering their time to move at a more expeditiously on this. I mean, if two people are working on this.
Can I just interrupt? I mean, if we don't need Anthony, I would just let him go. It's hard for him to have this kind of evening meeting. So
Sure.
If everyone is okay.
Yeah, thank you, Atesh. Does anybody have any additional questions for Anthony?
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you,
very
Anthony.
informative.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Anthony.
thank you for
Appreciate
joining
your
us.
time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much.
much.
Have a great night.
And then
Thank
Bobby has his hand raised as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just chime in. I think if there's two people that want to break off into a working group and focus on a particular area, they should do that. But just generally, I think I am also concerned about two-person working groups. I don't know how effective that could be. But more importantly, I think I'm also open to just meeting more often if we need to. So I would look at this. I mean, this committee is certainly be a long-term committee, but in this interim period, I see it more of a task force that we're supposed to kind of get in, get to work, and come back with some recommendations. And task forces often meet, more frequently, and typically in the beginning. So I'm also just willing to meet more, often if we want to make some recommendations. It's not just before Hitesh comes back and discusses bonds, but it also has a lot to do with when we're going to talk about the CIP, process that has obviously that, drives the amount of bonds that, Hitesh or we look at issuing. So that, I just wanted to say that I'm also open to meeting more often. And
at this point, to a point, Councilmember Burns, you've raised in the past, we don't really have a work plan for this committee. We don't know what our marching orders are.
We're creating them.
Yeah, so we're in the process of creating them. And so I think it would be prudent if we devoted some time on an upcoming agenda to talk about that. Like, what are we trying to do, and what kind of advice and recommendations, what type of advice and recommendations do we want to, impose upon ourselves to deliver?
So I would also just say, I mean, we can't, obviously it's awkward and clumsy to be doing research while we're all meeting here. So there's nothing to preclude two people, with one, to work and do some deep further investigation regarding bonds or CIP or, anything else related to the budget in a specified area where either like David has expertise or Sherry or Leslie. I think go for it. Like, why not? If it's not violating OMA and we're going to get further along, that's silly to say not to. We're not going to come together.
No one's saying,
and do.
yeah, no one's saying not to. It's just to say that it would be the official way that the committee is organizing itself into working groups to get things done. I think if we want to do things officially, let's just have it here at a committee meeting. And if folks want to go off and do additional research, that's totally fine.
Claire, are you suggesting something along the lines of, like, you and Leslie are the pension folks, and Sherry, Steve, and Bobby are the capital improvement folks? Is that the kind of thing?
Yeah, or something. And David, seems like you understand bonds really well. I would just say, yeah, like, so that maybe someone who wants to, reach out and say, hey, if I can do something or help, or I'd like to, work together, and then bring back some, research to the full group. I think it
Bobby,
would be...
is your hand still raised again, or? There we go.
No, I'm good.
Okay. I think that may very well make sense after we go through a process of kind of defining our work plan and defining our marching orders here. And once we decide what we're trying to do, then we'll figure out how to get there.
Well, I think we said tonight, for example, we're on bonds, that we need to review how we're issuing bonds, and our debt, and what we feel is we need to be incurring large amounts of debt for. And I think in the end we actually need to move towards sort of a bond checklist.
But I think that we issue bonds to cover capital improvement projects. So I don't think we're fully prepared to have that conversation until after we've been through this review of our CIP process.
Right. But I'm saying that we have experts here, community members volunteering, giving their time, and they are experts. I would, the fact that Sherry has offered to, wants to go ahead and start doing more research. I don't want to hold anybody back. I think we should absolutely take advantage of this and help get our city finances in better shape.
Would it make sense? I know upcoming is pensions the topic scheduled for February, Hitesh?
Yes.
Would it be too much of a change to do the CIP in February?
I mean, I'm fine. I can check with Lara, because I told her about March that we might need you. But yeah, I can. I mean, it's like almost a month, so I can ask her.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm feeling like CIP and bonds go hand in hand, so we should group those two closer together.
I think the main distinction for me is that if there's a topic where we're going to do a deeper dive, especially if it involves like city staff making themselves available, or someone else, some other company we work with, like we had today, I would want to be a part of those, whether I was a part of that working group or not. And so I just think some meetings we may want to hold a special meeting about a particular topic, and whoever is interested in that, can participate in those meetings. Whoever doesn't have to. But I there's just a lot of this first year. I want to soak up as much information as I can so I can represent the interests of my constituents. And I don't want to be, blocked off from any opportunities to learn. So, so that I'll just kind of close with that. But Chair Newsom, I think you're looking at this the right way, and support it. I got to run, but
thanks. Yeah, I'd like to wrap up quickly. Sherry has a question, and then I'll just kind of wrap up if that's all right.
Actually, not a question, but maybe at the next meeting we could add on the agenda just to come up maybe collaboratively on what topics for the rest of the year that we want to go through, and also maybe the structure of our committee, because I feel like we kind of introduced ourselves, we're put on the committee, and I'm just trying to define our roles a little more. So
Yeah. So I guess my recommendation would be, whether it's pensions or capital improvements that we do next month, that we'll go through kind of a similar overview for our own benefit, but also put some time on the agenda to have that internal discussion about how we want to organize the committee, and maybe start drafting a work plan.
I mean,
Sounds
Jonathan,
good to
don't you
me.
think we could combine the, the capital improvement committee and pensions? I mean, it just,
they are kind of two separate, and once you go into this kind of a detail, I mean, it's a subject by itself. Pension is a big issue too, how they calculate liability, actuarial report, what are the methods of funding. So it's, pension is, I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, the issue is, Hitesh, we've been talking about this committee, I think, was formed, in July or August? And by the time we kind of get through all this, we're going to be March, April. It's been not getting much done.
I mean, and I'm fine. It is up to the chair and all that, but I'm just throwing it out there. So you saw, okay, we discussed for almost 2 hours just the debt issue, at that to maybe higher level. But yes, at least capital funding, the projects and what type of projects, and then how we fund that. That could be, again, an easily 2-hour discussion. And pensions is a lot bigger issue than that, And again, it's up to the I mean, I know right now, Councilmember Newsma is the chair, but if the Councilmember Wynn decides, I mean, yes, staff is open to that.
So I think maybe what I'll suggest is, we take one topic per month over the next at least several months, pensions or in capital improvement being on the upcoming agendas. But also next month, let's devote some agenda time to, defining our work plan, and maybe we can come up with a draft next month and then approve it in March, and then we can actually get to work. Once we have that work plan, we'll have our marching orders. At this point, we don't have our marching orders, and I feel like, as a non-financial expert, speaking for myself alone, I'm still in learning mode, and I want to know more so I can better advocate for my constituents and better advocate for my priorities and point of view. I'm still in learning mode myself.
Yeah, I think we all are, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's going to be incremental progress, right? There's no silver bullet here that we're going to find. It's how do we, incrementally improve things over an extended period of time.
But our first opportunity for a good whack at the piñata is in June, when we are going to be issuing the bonds. And if we want to change course at that point, that would be a prudent time to do so.
Yes, it seems like that is a decision date we have. What amount of bonds, what and why, what term and why. Right.
And I mean, the thing is, in terms of pensions, I mean, similar decision would be right around the budget time, when we say, okay, these are the actually recommended contributions. So that would become the tax levy for fire pension and police pension. So you have more time there, because obviously that would come first in June, July, and then the September, October would be a tax levy time and the budget time.
Great. If nobody has anything else, I will ask for a motion to end the meeting.
I move that we end the meeting.
I'll second.
And Claire makes the motion, and Sherry has seconded the motion to adjourn. So there will be no further business to come before the committee. I will declare this meeting to be adjourned, and thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
And thank you, Hitesh, for
Thanks.
joining us.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.